I do have a question.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the interaction between this theory of narrative logic, the three-stage theory of anime culture, and with the historical and social relationships that seem to correspond to those particular moments? Is this particular theory of narrative logic autonomous or independent of historical changes that you see in post-war Japanese capitalism, or is it something that is in close conjunction with it in some relationships?
If we follow Frederick Jameson's theory, the third stage is obviously called postmodernism, and the first stage is modernism. And although I pretty much agree with Jameson's theory, transformation from modernism into postmodernism, but I wanted to focus more on market side, consumption side, actual way media producers and production companies strategically developed way of employing some narratives. So theoretically, I believe that Jameson's theory that information society create particular aesthetics of particular styles or particular consumption habits to consume things, and that can be seen in, for example, stage 3 Japanese animation becoming more and more character oriented rather than traditional narrative oriented.
Now you also talk about in the third stage, the post Tenchimuyo stage, this notion of excess that seems to inform a lot of the images, and also the consumption, the representation. Now, excess and this hyper reality of the image are both very much theoretical tropes found in Jean Baudrillard. Do you find his theoretical framework to be excessive in a way about his claims, or do you think there is some kind of congruence with what you yourself are doing?
I think many scholars of Japanese animation, and especially Japanese animation culture, is based on Baudrillard. For example, the example I made about character consumption, Azuma Hiroki is basically following Baudrillard's theory about transformation from grand narrative to small narrative. So in contemporary society, we don't have grand narratives for which we can base our beliefs or behaviors, like religion or traditional political system or economic system or beliefs. So we just have just small narratives, and we have to live with those small narratives as a substitute of the grand narrative. And again, I basically follow Baudrillard, but at the same time, I focus more on the actual production process and market strategies in order to supplement the theoretical side of the argument.
Any other questions? I know a lot of you. Know a lot about
yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I don't misunderstand what you mean by character image. And my question goes to how individualized the character is. In other words, and the examples you gave of defining the characters seem to tend to the physical, from style of dress, hair, speech, sort of physical attributes, maybe somewhat less social relations, if I remember correctly. So, is there I guess maybe another way to put the question, will a person from American culture properly understand what you mean by a character image without further explanation?
Character image, is that more like the section I talked about, Kadoka blockbuster? It's interesting that in terms of Kadoka blockbuster, it's interesting that traditionally, movie actor and actresses, they should present themselves as a person with order, person with some transcendental quality to present something. But it's interesting in case of Yakushimaru Hiroko and Harada Tomoyo, two almost iconic characters, actresses around this period. they are not actually actresses, and it's more like Kadokawa's presentation of image materials create some kind of virtual kind of actresses. The example is, for example, Harada Tomoyo, Yakushimaru Hiroko both became really famous and popular actresses, but because of the way they differ, actual those two actresses differ from the image Kadokawa tried to present, they eventually failed. So they quickly disappeared, or even Kadokawa put them to disappear from the scene so that not to betray, not to destroy the images they created around the character. So it's again really interesting creation of the character or the idol as a commodity that will serve for so many purposes of selling a movie, selling a novel, and selling merchandise. And it's even more interesting that although after a long silence, both Harada Tomoyo and Yakushimaru Hiroko recently restarted their careers, and they are almost caricaturizing their image in the 80s in really interesting way. So they are caricaturizing about themselves and becoming famous by caricaturizing themselves.
Okay, just thank you so much. It's right at 1:30. So how about if we just close it? But I do have Japanese tea and then cookies. So please help yourself. And if you have any questions, to him, or you can talk, each other as long as you have time. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming. Very much, I appreciate you coming. And then thank you very much for presenting it to us. どうもありがとうございました。